Good afternoon. I'm glad everyone's here. I'd just like to start by thanking Scott and the LSI team for another great meeting. This is our third year here, and it's just incredible how every year it seems to get more remarkable. So my name is Lishan Aklog. I'm Chairman and CEO of Lucid Diagnostics. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about Lucid. We're a commercial stage cancer prevention medical diagnostics company, and we're focused on early pre-cancer detection in the millions of people with gastroesophageal reflux disease, or GERD, also known as chronic heartburn, who are at risk of developing esophageal adenocarcinoma, which is a highly lethal form of esophageal cancer. And our mission is really simple, is to prevent deaths from this cancer in these at-risk patients with chronic heartburn. We have two lead products. The Isoguard esophageal DNA assay, it's a molecular assay, which I'll talk about a bit, and a very novel cell collection device called EsoCheck. Both of these are CE mark cleared. Isoguard is an LDT, and EsoCheck is 510K cleared. And together, they form the first and only commercially available test that's capable of serving as a widespread screening tool to prevent these deaths through the early detection of esophageal precancer. This came out of a research out of Case Western Reserve University that was published in a landmark paper in Science Translational Medicine in 2018. They presented two novel technologies, a DNA methylation assay, which became Isoguard, and a swallowable balloon capsule catheter that became EsoCheck. And they showed a greater than 90% sensitivity and specificity at detecting esophageal precancer and cancer. Some highlights of our company right now: we have commercialized Isoguard as a laboratory-developed test at a dedicated CLIA-CAP laboratory. We have Lucid test centers where patients can go to get the procedure performed. We have CMS effective payment of $1,938. We're awaiting local coverage determination. We have breakthrough device designation, and we have a large target population of 13 million patients who are at risk, who are already recommended for screening. Some near-term milestones, which I'll talk about, and a multi-billion-dollar TAM. Important to note that Lucid is a public company that's also a major subsidiary of PAVmed, which is a NASDAQ-listed, diversified commercial stage medical technology company. So PAVmed owns a majority interest in Lucid. PAVmed initially financed the development of this technology and its commercial launch, and Lucid completed a $70 million IPO in 2020 in the fall, but still managed by PAVmed. We have some renowned experts. We have the former chairman and CEO of Exact Sciences as our vice chairman, Stan Lapidus, former head of the IVD branch at FDA as our primary regulatory advisor, and a leading figure in the esophageal space, Nick Shaheen, who is the lead author on the guidelines as it relates to Barrett's. So the opportunity, as I mentioned, is to prevent deaths from esophageal cancer. This is a bad actor, highly lethal, 16,000 deaths a year, second most lethal cancer, 80% mortality, but the most important number is here, is in red, that even stage 1 disease carries a 40% mortality. And what that means is that it's not enough, as in other cancers, breast, colon, cervical, and others, that you pick up stage 1 disease. You have to pick this up in the precancer stage if you're going to have any hope of having an impact on deaths. The other thing that's quite unique about this is that its incidence has increased dramatically, 20,000 cases last year, a 500% increase over the last few decades, in contrast to all the cancers you can see there, breast, colon, prostate, and so forth, which have generally remained flat during that period of time, likely related to the obesity epidemic. Its predisposing condition, GERD, is also ubiquitous. 1 in 4 adults have it, 13 billion in sales of proton pump inhibitor medications a year, and 50 million people who have weekly symptoms. So the key factor to know about the biology here is that GERD can lead to esophageal precancer and cancer, and there's a steady progression. There's no controversy about this. You have the predisposing condition, early stage precancer, which is called non-dysplastic Barrett's, late stage precancer, dysplastic Barrett's, and ultimately malignant cancer. The good news is that the precancer can be monitored and cured before the cancer develops. So if you have non-dysplastic, you can get an endoscopic surveillance and pick up when it reaches the dysplastic stage before it's fully malignant, and that can be treated with a highly effective endoscopic ablation procedure, which reliably prevents progression to cancer and reverses the process. The societies recommend screening, so we know what the risk factors are. I won't enumerate them there, but they're very common risk factors, 3 out of 6, plus a history of GERD. Strong recommendation to get screened by all the major societies with an endoscopy. The 13 million people are really the highest target group in this population. The bad news is that it just doesn't get done. Unlike colonoscopy, where 60–70% of people get screened, less than 10% of people who are already recommended for screening, what will now be the third round of guidelines that are about to be published, get screened. And that's just a tragedy. People are dying endlessly every single day of esophageal cancer who had GERD, had chronic heartburn, who could have been screened, who didn't. And we know that screening works. We know breast, colon, 40–50% declines in mortality over the last 20 years. And all we need is a viable screening program. We've had all the other elements here. I want to enumerate them. You can read them there. But the one thing that's been missing until now is a widespread screening tool, and now we have that. Commercial opportunity is massive. 13 million patients, I already told you that. Medicare has kind of set the bar at this $1,900, just under $2,000 payment. 90% margins, huge, huge market opportunity overall. The assay is available now as a laboratory-developed test. We launched our own laboratory. We had this contracted out until last month. Now we have our own laboratory just up not too far from here in Lake Forest. And the sample gets sent to the central laboratory. The Isoguard assay, which as I mentioned is an NGS assay, is performed. A patient report, positive or negative is returned, which tells you either you have anything along the spectrum from pre-cancer all the way to cancer. The procedure, also very straightforward. Here's the device. It's a catheter with a capsule. You can see it in its inverted state on the right, about the size of a multivitamin. A balloon emerges from this as it's inflated, has these ridges, and it allows you in less than 5 minutes, non-invasively, in an office, no anesthesia, really 2 minutes, to anatomically sample cells in the lower 5 centimeters of the esophagus where this condition occurs, and it protects that sample from dilution and contamination as you move up. Our commercial strategy is straightforward. As I mentioned, we have made a lot of progress on reimbursement. We have payment. We're awaiting local coverage determination, hopefully sometime quite soon, and we're in the process of working with private payers as well. We're targeting 3 different constituents here, from GI physicians and foregut surgeons who are really focused on the esophagus, to primary care physicians where most of these patients are. Very few patients see a gastroenterologist, to patients themselves who understand heartburn, they understand cancer, they just need to be educated on the relationship between the two. We've determined that the most efficient and effective way to get out there and get people to get this test is to actually have our own test centers. So we've opened test centers in Phoenix, Salt Lake City, Denver, and Vegas, and soon we'll have 3 more centers in the Northwest, and eventually through this year we'll be expanding nationwide. And this is what our test centers look like. We have a nice office, patient comes in, a nurse practitioner and an MA meet them, they do this procedure, they can do about 20 of these a day. That's our Salt Lake City center, this is our Scottsdale center, open houses, other opportunities to educate patients and physicians. And the economics of this are really attractive. It doesn't take much to lease an office. It has a certain amount of cost associated with an NP and a medical assistant. We only need to do 2 tests a day to break even. So this is a variable cost opportunity. So in Phoenix, we've actually expanded that beyond the test centers to actually do direct-to-consumer telemedicine. So there's a platform right now, esoguardconsultation.com or through esoguard.com, where anybody can go and make a visit with a telemedicine physician to determine whether they're a candidate for this. They'll get sent to our test center. We have some advertising, and we're sort of learning what the yield on direct-to-consumer would be. We have a variety of clinical trials going on. I won't go through all of them, but we have a PMH study going on to transition from a LDT to a PMA, and a variety of other registries and tests and studies across the board, both institutional and sponsored by us. And we raised this capital in October to really drive our growth strategy around commercial expanding. We're expanding to a full-time sales team. We're working towards having nationwide test centers and nationwide DTC program. We've already acquired our own CLIA laboratory using those proceeds, and expanding the clinical evidence. We're moving forward to get support in guidelines, both specialty guidelines, internal medicine guidelines, and hopefully at some point, USPSTF. So with that, I'll stop, and I appreciate you guys taking the time to hear about our story. Thank you.